First things first, I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is Nick Wright. This is Chris Broussard hanging out with us this week and having a good time doing it.
A great week.
It only took 1 week, and in fact only 4 days of the week, for Chris Broussard to deal with what every person who's ever sat in that chair has dealt with, which is Broussard's a little under the weather.
Are you really?
Yeah.
A little bit of a
nasal
drip.
Responsibility for that.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Everyone's sick.
I do. I wasn't even sick this week. I was never in aisle 7. Yeah. Yes, I'm really sorry about that. Nope.
I can't scoot anywhere.
But we've loved having you.
It's been great.
Despite
being under the weather.
All of that. Hey, it's TGI Friday, which means it is TGI almost the weekend with a great slate of NFL action, playoff berths on the line, and that's where we start this morning. For the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, their entire season comes down to this weekend. For Philly, couldn't be simpler. If they beat the Giants, no matter what the Cowboys do, they are in. Dallas, on the other hand, they need some help. They need to beat Washington, and then they need to cross their fingers that Philly loses. 2 quarterbacks with a lot to prove this weekend in Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz, and both know exactly what's on the line.
All we can control is what we can control. Focus on this game, winning this game, and if we're fortunate, we'll make the most of it when that time comes.
As leaders and coaches as well have done a great job of just making sure guys are still bought into this, in the here and now, and not dwelling on the past, not looking ahead either, and just going out to work. You know, we got our work cut out for us against a good opponent on the road, and obviously if we win, we're in, so we know what's at stake.
There is a lot at stake for both of these organizations. And, Nick, I'll start with you. Who do you have more confidence in, though, the Eagles or the Cowboys heading into this weekend?
I don't know why anyone would have any level of confidence in Dallas whatsoever. Their season was on the line 5 days ago, and they played offensively one of their worst games of the year. Defensively, they only allowed 17 points, but they allowed Carson Wentz to have one of his most efficient, productive games of the year. A team that had been in Philadelphia turning the ball over throughout the season. The Cowboys were unable to force any turnovers in that football game. So why am I supposed to believe that Dallas, now in week 17, now they flip the switch, now they're a great football team? Philly, on the other hand, we have treated some Philly wins better than we've treated, to me, some Dallas, or worse than we've treated some Dallas losses. Dallas started out 3-0 and looked like an excellent team. Philly started out 1-2 and looked like what the hell's wrong with them. Since then, these two teams have gone in very divergent directions. Philly since then is 7-5. And 4 of those 5 losses are to quality opponents. The one bad, including New England, Seattle, Minnesota. The one bad loss is the one that's glaring to Miami from just now 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, I guess, which then led to the Giants game, which was an ugly win. The Washington game, which was an ugly win, leading into the Dallas game. I believe that Philadelphia has righted itself to a degree over the last month of football by finding ways to beat the Giants in Washington, by dominating the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas, meanwhile, after that 3-0 start, what are they on the year? Oh, so they're 4-8 in their next 12 games. If you go 4-8 over 12 football games, you absolutely could lose to a Washington team that the first time you played them was a 1-touchdown game going into the fourth quarter against this same quarterback, by the way, Case Keenum, who in that game had a 105 quarterback rating, played well and played relatively well, so to speak. And so I have far more confidence in Philadelphia this weekend against the Giants than Dallas against Washington.
I actually have more confidence in Dallas. And I'm going to tell you why. I think one thing we can agree on is that Dallas is the more talented team, especially with Philadelphia with the injuries. Okay, so they're the most talented team. Secondly, Dak Prescott, last week, obviously he was injured, and you saw it in some of his passes. And I think he learned from that experience. I think this week, we know he's not really throwing the ball in practice this week, but I think having played last week through the injury is going to help him play through it this week. And I think he'll be smarter. I think he'll make better throws. I think he'll make better decisions, knowing how to play with that injury. So I think think those are two factors in the Cowboys' favor. Also, Amari Cooper. He did not show up last week. He did not show up against New England. And now there's talk about, is he even a gamer? You know, people are wondering that, and not just from this year, but even looking at some of the past, as he wants that big contract. So I think he knows he has to show up and play well. And then you mentioned Washington. What is Washington playing for? They don't, it's not like they have Dwayne Haskins playing and you got the young quarterback who, you know, season's over, but we want him to look good. He wants to do his best. Right. I'm not even sure they want to win. It's best if they lose for their draft position. So those factors combined, it's not like I expect Dallas to necessarily come out and be the team we've all thought they could be going into the season. But I think they'll play well, and I think Washington has nothing to play for. On the other side, I think the Giants, even though their season's over too, you do have the young quarterback, and every time he's out there, Daniel Jones, you want him to play well. Pat Shurmur.
It's coaching for his job, man.
Right, okay, yeah, that's the thing. Is his job on the line? I think some of these players, now reportedly, you see the quotes, granted, they're saying what they need to say, but I think they like him, and certainly Jones. Jones looks at Pat Shurmur like, this is the guy that drafted me, this is the guy that gave me the starting position over a legend 3 games into the season. So he probably wants Shurmur to stay rather than have to learn a whole new system under a new staff. So I just think that the Giants, not to mention they almost beat the Eagles a few weeks ago. So I think that the Giants have a good chance of beating the Eagles, and I'm certain Dallas will beat Washington.
So let's focus on these two guys. Who do you trust more between them? Dak, who's clearly suffered with his shoulder injury, even though he says he's fine. He's not practicing during the week. Or Carson Wentz, who only in the last 3 weeks against mediocre teams has sort of come into 2017 Carson Wentz. Who do you trust more? It's going to take the organization on their back, head into this weekend and win a game.
Well, I absolutely trust Carson Wentz more. And Dak's shoulder injury does not explain the last 5 weeks of football. It might explain last week of football where Dak wasn't terrible, and I don't want to act like he was terrible, but obviously the Cowboys didn't score a touchdown. But Dak's first 10 weeks, the team was 6-4. He had 21 touchdowns, 9 picks, a 104 rating, and was averaging 320 yards passing per game. He was not an MVP frontrunner, but on that second tier of MVP candidates after those first 10 weeks. And if the team's record was better, he probably would have been a top 3 MVP candidate. The last 5 weeks, they're 1-4. He's averaging fewer than 300 yards passing per game. He has 5 touchdowns, 2 picks, and his passer rating has dropped to 85. That is not all because he played 1 game with a bad shoulder. It is because in the most critical stretch of their season, when their schedule got the toughest, Dak played his worst football. Carson, on the other hand, now their schedule has softened up at the end of the year, granted, but in their most critical stretch of the season, he was damn near perfect in the fourth quarter against the Giants. Same thing in the fourth quarter against Washington. Those 2 fourth quarters and overtime combined for 4 touchdowns, I believe. And then in the Cowboys game, as I mentioned, I believe played his best game of the year. And even that Dolphins game prior to it can't be put on Wentz's shoulders because they scored plenty of points in that game. That was a defensive meltdown against Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Dolphins. So I have far more confidence in Carson. And one other point, Chris, I'm curious what you think of this. Dak has played this whole year without a contract. Now you are this close to the finish line of, as long as I don't suffer a significant injury, I'm getting over $130 million. We're going to argue about the spread. How much does that creep into his mind as far as if he does need to run the ball for a first down, if he does want to get rid of the ball early, when he's been rolling these, he's been spinning this roulette wheel, so to speak, repeatedly this year, and now he's got 1 more spin left before he could possibly lose. I wonder if that affects how he plays this week.
I don't think that'll be any different because it's been that way all year. What if he got injured badly in game 7?
Sure.
It would have been the same thing. So I don't think he's worried about that. I do think, again, I always talk about his intangibles, his leadership. I do think he'll come out and play the typical game he's been playing. Now, that does have to be better than he's played the last 5 weeks. And Carson has been better over the last month. There's no doubt about it. And maybe you do have more faith in him playing a better game than Dak. Here's the thing. Carson has to be great. When you look at his supporting cast of receivers, Zach Ertz, his favorite target, may not be there. The running game, they've run the ball well.
The Eagles' defense over the totality of the season has not been great.
Right. So he has to be spectacular for them to win, even though it's just the Giants. Whereas Dak, with Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard has his moments, the receiving core, the defense. I just think he doesn't have to be great for them to win, whereas Wentz certainly has to be great with them to win with the injuries.
All right, Brian Westbrook is going to stop by. We will discuss what this weekend means for both of these teams. One of the biggest busts this season in the Cleveland Browns. They were the trendy preseason pick to make a deep playoff run, and yet they currently sit out of the playoffs at 6-9. One of the reasons why, their quarterback. Baker had some of the best stats ever for a rookie last season, then followed it up with some of the worst stats for any quarterback this season. But he says he's keeping it all in perspective.
I never thought it was going to be easy, but it's definitely a very big process. That's the beauty of it, to down the road, looking back on it through the struggles and everything that we've endured, and it's going to continue to have bumps in the road, but I think that's going to be the beauty of it, of me wishing that I was going to be here and having that come true, and just seeing where it's going to go from here on out.
So I listened to this soundbite 3 different times because I wanted to see if he was being humbled by this past season or if he was just answering a reporter's question. Do you think, though, Nick, that Baker is still the right guy to turn this Browns franchise around?
I think he's the right quarterback for the team in the short term and the long term, but I think there are some obvious major adjustments that need to be made. But first of all, I just want to say this. I don't believe Baker's comment. I don't believe he didn't think it was going to be easy. It's always been easy for Baker. He walks on to Texas Tech. It's supposed to be the hardest path possible, become a starting anything, much less quarterback, as a walk-on. And he's excellent. Good enough to where he can walk on at an even bigger time school in Oklahoma. And in back-to-back years, sets the all-time single-season efficiency record for any quarterback in college football history. And then he goes to the NFL. And a few weeks into his career, once he is named the starter, he kind of hits his groove and he sets the rookie touchdown passing record. It's always been easier than it should have been for Baker because of his talent, because of his drive, because of work ethic. It's not like things were handed to him. He's earned it. So I don't believe that Baker thought this year was going to be different. Why would he think it would be different than every other step of his football career? So I do think there has been some humbling, whether he wanted it or not. Now, to more directly answer your question, Jenna, I think he's the right quarterback to turn the Browns franchise around, to help them get on the track it looked like they were on after last year. But I think he is absolutely not the right person to be the emotional leader of your franchise. They need a big adult with a big personality, a real adult with a big personality, in that room to be the emotional center. And honestly, to be the true face of the franchise, which is why some of these unproven college head coaches is not the way I would go for the Browns, because he is not yet, I believe, emotionally mature enough to be starting NFL quarterback. I think he is talented enough to be starting NFL quarterback, but he can't be the person that turns around the locker room. He has to just be the person that gives you high quality quarterback play, and that is the entirety of his job description until he grows into the rest of the job.
Wow, that's interesting. First of all, let me say this. I agree with you in that I think he can be the quarterback there, and they can be successful. I don't like saying he's the guy to turn the franchise around because, quite honestly, I have more faith in OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, and Kareem Hunt than I do in Baker. But I do think with that, think of what I just named.
Yep.
That with that type of arsenal around him, I think he's a good enough quarterback where they can be a really successful team. But what you said is interesting because when you think about the teams that are really the most successful, especially the ones that are successful every year, New England. Now, Belichick obviously is a strong presence as the coach, but Brady kind of sets the emotional tone of that team, right? Seattle, Russell Wilson, same thing. Aaron Rodgers, he's had his issues there,
but it's been still his team,
right?
For sure.
New Orleans, you're right.
Yeah, Drew Brees. Like, I don't know what team where the quarterback isn't that guy where they're successful year after year after year. Now, Cam is a guy that may be a little like Baker, up and down, kind of a strange kind of leader at times. And that team has been up and down like that as well.
But don't you think that typically young quarterbacks grow into that? Like, Patrick Mahomes is the star of the Chiefs, but the voice of the Chiefs is Andy Reid. The only reason Patrick Mahomes became the face of it is because he was so sensational immediately. Russell Wilson became the voice of Seattle, but early on, he had some pushback, and it was Pete Carroll and a kind of that Legion of Boom leadership. And while Drew Brees at this point is a partner with Sean Payton, early on, this was a Sean Payton operation that Drew Brees was a godsend for, and certainly Belichick set the tone early for New England before Brady matured into it. So I think for young quarterbacks, typically, they do need, the most successful ones that we've seen, a strong established head coach to help shepherd them along the way, so to speak.
Well, I think Mahomes and Wilson, you saw the character, not that Baker doesn't have character, I'm not saying that, but you saw character traits in them that screamed leader. The work ethic and just the way they handled themselves, their sound bites and things like that. Now, we haven't seen many like Baker. I mean, obviously you had Jim McMahon with Chicago, but that was 1 year, really, where they won the Super Bowl. We haven't seen many quarterbacks lead this way. I'm not saying it can't be done. This is a different day and age. But I thought that was just very interesting, because if he can't be that emotional leader, now maybe he will grow into it. And that's one of my main points and why I want to give Baker the chance and not throw him out and say he can't get it done because he's had a second bad year. They need a better coaching staff. Freddie Kitchens obviously has had trouble calling the plays. You talked about it earlier in the week against Baltimore, just at the end of the first half, how it was madness. And their red zone play calling has been horrible. So with a better coaching staff, I don't know if they keep Todd Monken or not, but he really hasn't, the offensive coordinator, hasn't gotten a chance to call the plays this year. I think he would be doing things a lot differently. But whatever they do, I'm sure Freddie Kitchens won't be there. They bring in a better coaching staff. I think that will help Baker. And for all his bad stats this year, he is 20th in QBR, which isn't great. But we know QBR takes into context everything. His QBR is still higher than Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and Josh Allen.
Well, the Goff thing's interesting because who is the voice and the face of the Rams? The coach. I would say the voice and face of the Niners is the coach. Like, hell, it's the defensive coach as well. We see him on the sidelines all fired up all the time. Like, I think for some of these young quarterbacks, it doesn't mean that it won't one day where they have full reign over everything. But early on, if you've got, I just do wonder, so much of this is circumstantial, if Baker had a Sean McVay type in his life or even a more established guy, how different it would have been than going from Hugh Jackson to interim coach Greg Williams to Freddie Kitchens.
And then the other thing with Baker is you love who he is. It's what made him. It's what got him here. And then you want to say, okay, you need to change that to be whoever we think the quarterback should be. And then you got to play with those two sides. Some New England Patriots who still have a little work to do if they want a first-round bye. They need either a win against the Dolphins on Sunday or a Chiefs loss to the Chargers. Should be easy in theory as the Pats crushed Miami 43-0 earlier in the season. But Nick, do the Patriots absolutely need that bye to have any chance at another Super Bowl run?
1,000% yes. I believe this Patriots season, with or without the bye, ends in the divisional round against Kansas City. The only question is where the game's played. If they beat Miami, then they get the bye, and that game will be played in New England. If they lose to Miami, then they don't get the bye, and that game will be played in Kansas City. But it doesn't happen very often, but I am occasionally wrong. And if I'm going to be wrong about the Patriots, it's going to be because they get the bye. they take on a Chiefs team in round 2 that got beat up somehow in round 1, or maybe gets upset by Tennessee. Tennessee just runs the ball, and all of a sudden the Patriots are not playing the Chiefs in round 2. They're playing the Texans or the Bills, the teams they've already played this year, obviously, beating the Bills twice, lost to the Texans. Bad weather game, a one more vintage Brady performance he's able to pull. I don't think they can, and then go on the road to Baltimore and win that game. And where maybe Lamar gets banged up in his playoff game. There's so many things that have to happen, but it has to for this Patriots team, with as anemic as an offense as it's had over the course of the season, last week notwithstanding. There is no way it's going to happen in 3 consecutive weeks, including having to go on the road in the second and what would be the AFC Championship game. So I don't think they make the Super Bowl either way, Broussard, and I don't think you do either. You probably give them a better chance than I do. But they've never made a Super Bowl without a bye, and there's a reason for that. It's not just the home field. It is the one fewer playoff game is such an enormous edge. They absolutely need it this year when it's the least talented Patriot team we've seen in a decade.
And think about what you said. They've never reached a Super Bowl without the bye. And that was when their offense wasn't, as you put it, anemic. So Tom Brady at his best, they needed the buys, or at least they've always prospered with the buys. And Bill Belichick, here's the thing as well, because I agree with you, to expect Brady to have maybe 4 straight top flight games is probably too much at this stage of his career. 3, he can give you that. Or 2 in a row, and then you get the 2 weeks off before the Super Bowl.
You can count last week as the first one?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
We're putting that. He did play great. No, I'm not counting that one. I'm starting over. I'm starting over in the playoffs. Yep. All right. But they definitely need to buy. There's no question about it. You mentioned if they get Kansas City in the second round, you're going to need the extra week to prepare for Pat Mahomes. Yep. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And there's a reason that they've had this success with the buys, even in the regular season. 15-5 off the bye week in Bill Belichick's tenure there. They prepare better than any organization in the league for opponents. So the more time they have to prep for you, the better chance they have of winning. They definitely need to buy.
We talk about this tandem a lot, Belichick and Brady, and who really deserves the credit for how well they've played and how far they've gotten over the years. Don't you think that if they were able to get far this year, it would show us that this is Belichick doing this? I mean, Brady's not vintage Brady. I mean, you could really look at the fact that if they could go far deep into the playoffs,
this year, if they end up making or winning a Super Bowl, this year certainly goes much more heavily in the Belichick side of the ledger than the previous year. In Tom Brady's defense, the Super Bowl they won a few years ago against Atlanta, that Brady gets to wear all that glory himself, because the Belichick defense with 2 weeks to prepare got shredded for 2.5 plus quarters against Atlanta, and then Brady led the greatest comeback any of us have ever seen. But that is going to be the only way that debate is going to become anywhere other than 60-40 one direction or another, Broussard, is if Brady plays somewhere else and he either has immense success, or when Brady's done playing for the Patriots, Belichick has immense success. You're going to have to see them apart with one of them thrive. It's the only way that this debate's going to have any type of resolution.
Here's the other thing Belichick's fighting, because you're right. The more success they have as Brady's older, that goes toward Belichick, right? The credit. However, Belichick's had 7 seasons in his career without Tom Brady. They made the playoffs once. Okay, 2 times they had a winning record. And even in New England, the year he coached there before Brady was the starter, they won 5 games, I believe. And then the year Brady stepped in from Drew Bledsoe and they won the Super Bowl his first year, they were losing. They had a losing record when Brady stepped in. Yep. So Belichick has to overcome all of that to get the lion's share of the credit over Tom Brady.
On to the NFC now, where the playoff buys are still up in the air. The 49ers can lock up one of them with a win against the Seahawks. The Packers can do the same by beating Detroit. All right, follow along now. The Saints get a bye if they beat Carolina, and either the 49ers lose to Seattle or the Packers lose to the Lions, and the Seahawks steal the bye if they beat the Niners and the Packers lose to Detroit. I thought it was pretty simple. Just wanted to say the words anyway. All right, Nick, all that being said, which NFC team needs a bye the most?
Well, I'm going to just off the top eliminate Seattle, because I think Seattle has overachieved this year. I picked them to win the division, and even I didn't think they'd be alive for a bye going into Week 17. And they might very well beat San Francisco this weekend. But Seattle, they have a point differential this year of plus 12. They've outscored their opponents in total in the year by 12 points. That is worse than Philly. That is worse than Tampa. That is worse than Tennessee. It's 70 points worse than Dallas. So I say all that to say this. With or without a bye, I do not believe Seattle has the horses to make the Super Bowl. The other three teams do. And I like it. I don't know if during the regular season there's been a bigger Seattle supporter than me, but I think this thing ends in the divisional round of the conference championship game. So now we're talking about San Francisco, New Orleans, or Green Bay. There's a case you made for any of the three. I believe the answer is Green Bay for this reason. They have an edge that goes along with not only a bye, but home playoff games that those other teams do not have, which is the elements there are so different than almost anywhere else in the league other than maybe Buffalo and New England. But it's even different in Green Bay, given the bitter cold it gets to, the weather they have to deal with. And Green Bay is conditioned for that. And for the first time in a long time, they have a team built to where it can take advantage of it because they have won 12 games this year without Aaron Rodgers having to be brilliant. I understand the home field advantage New Orleans has in that Superdome. I understand San Francisco probably wanting to avoid those elements of either the Superdome or going to Lambeau. For Green Bay, I think having a bye, which will only be the third time since Aaron Rodgers took over as a quarterback, a validation of the season. The playoffs go through Green Bay. And by the way, one thing that's very simple, they get a bye as long as they beat Detroit. We know that. If Green Bay beats Detroit, we don't know if they'd be the one of the two. They get a bye. Also, what it would mean for Green Bay if they don't. Do all this work, and then in Week 17, you fall on your face to the Lions, and now all of a sudden, you're playing an extra playoff game. For all those reasons, Green Bay's my answer.
Logic says you're right about Green Bay and the elements. Lambeau Field, the home field advantage. However, since 2000, they're only 6-5 in home playoff games. I was talking to Greg Jennings, our colleague here at Fox, who obviously played with the Packers and won a Super Bowl. He said there's no home field advantage when it comes to Lambeau. As far as it's home field because you're at home, you have the crowd. But as far as you having the advantage in the weather,
the elements,
he said you can't get used
for everybody.
Yes, he said even if you're used to it, you live there, it's still freezing and you feel it. So maybe that lines up with the record 6-5. I think it's San Francisco, and here's why: Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyle Shanahan. What don't they have that the other coaches have? Experience. Now, Matt LaFleur obviously doesn't have it, but he's got Aaron Rodgers. So every other team, New Orleans, Drew Brees, Super Bowl champion. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, Super Bowl champion. Seattle, Russell Wilson, Super Bowl champion. Pete Carroll, and, LaFleur has had Sean Payton. So look, Garoppolo has shown that he adjusts to challenges and handles them well. Every time he's been thrown in there, they win. Now, whether or not his numbers were spectacular, sometimes they are, but even when they haven't been, they've tended to win. So he's shown all that, but the playoffs are a different animal. And so I just think that for them to have the extra time to prep for it will help them. And as I said earlier, they haven't been playing great football lately. All right, offensively, they had trouble protecting Garoppolo last week. Defensively, first half of the season, they're allowing 11 points a game. Their defense looks almost historically good. Last 7 games, they've given up 26.5 points a game. So they need to get themselves straightened out, and I think the extra week would help them do that.
You don't think it alleviates the pressure for San Francisco? This is sort of a surprise year, I think, a little bit for them. They came on maybe a year before anyone else thought they would. They don't have all the pressure of, well, we've been there, we're returning there, we have all these players that, Well,
I think they've got the pressure in this regard. You're right that I don't think most people expected them to be, you win in Week 17, you're the 1 seed in the NFC in that discussion. But one of the reasons they're surprising is this 6-year plan with Shanahan and Lynch got off to such a slow start. Like Shanahan, we don't think about it now, but if they had another bad year, we'd be saying, wait, we're halfway through this tenure, and what the hell's going on here? The one last point for Green Bay, because neither one of us talked much about New Orleans. I understand New Orleans, the only playoff game they've lost in that building with Brees and Peyton was the one last year that they then changed the rules because of. Given New Orleans' losses on the defensive line with Rankins and with Davenport being done for the season, I think on that fast track in New Orleans, Green Bay would be able to go there and move the football. I'm not saying they would necessarily win. I think you'd go there and move the football. I cannot see either one of these teams, even though San Francisco dominated Green Bay when they played, Jimmy Garoppolo with no playoff experience, or Drew Brees, who has played so differently in outdoor playoff games, going to Lambeau. And I think Green Bay, if they needed to play a high-scoring game, you still have Aaron Rodgers in perfect conditions in San Francisco or in New Orleans. Can either one of those teams go on the road if it's 18 degrees and snowing and win in Lambeau? I don't think they can, which is why, to me, home field and the bye for Green Bay is so critical.
It's going to be interesting this weekend. Back here on First Things First, now joined by former All-Pro running back Brian Westbrook.
What up, B?
Morning.
Good morning. See you, my friend.
Brother.
We got a lot to talk about coming up this weekend. Let's start with the Dallas Cowboys. It might already be a wrap for Jason Garrett after a very disappointing season, losing 4 of 5 games down the stretch in a tight NFC East race. But if he wants any chance of saving his job, he will need to beat Washington, and he will need to hope that the Eagles lose to the Giants. Quarterback Dak Prescott was asked about his coach entering the final regular season game of his contract. Take a listen to what he had to say.
No, I think it's the last game on mine as well. So I'd be damned if I speak on anybody else's future or their place.
Nick, what do you think about what Dak had to say?
I think that's more about him than about Jason Garrett. I think Dak, it's amazing. Dak, who's in his early 20s, seems to have a better understanding of public negotiation than Stephen and Jerry Jones, who are combined, I think, 130 years old. He's got it. He understands. Yeah, you're damn straight. It might be the last game of my contract. This might be the last time y'all get to see me as your quarterback. And you can, again, this is not necessarily how I feel, but this is me projecting what I think Dak's feeling. And maybe y'all are a little disappointed in 7 and 8. I'm disappointed in 7 and 8, the way I played the last 5 weeks. You know what was more disappointing? Quincy Carter. You know what was more disappointing? The oasis, or the desert of quarterbacks you went through between Troy Aikman and when Tony Romo got here. That 5-year stretch. So, yeah, I mean, Jason Garrett might not be here, to misquote Magic Johnson. I might not be here either. So that to me is what Dak Prescott was saying there. It was not about Jason Garrett. It was about, reminder, guys, I played this whole year betting on myself, and we can have disagreements about quite how great I played, but ultimately I got 26 touchdowns, 11 picks, a passer rating in the high 90s, and I'm going to throw for almost 5,000 yards. He's thrown for 4,600 yards at this point. Y'all gonna have to pay me, because that's how this business works my age, my position. So to me, Dak's comment was about himself much more so than about the coach.
I absolutely agree with you. He is basically saying, I bet on myself, and that's the way it is. And here's the other thing, and this is what happens in football around the league. I remember I was in San Francisco, and I went to the running back coach, was like, listen, the wide receivers aren't blocking the way they're supposed to. We talked about it in meetings, and I said, you need to go talk to them, talking to the running back coach. He said, listen, I'm here to farm my own land. I'm worried about me, and me only, my group of guys. That's what Dak is saying. I'm worried about me. Jason Garrett had an opportunity to come out and say something about Dak's contract early in the season. I don't remember him saying anything. I don't remember Jason Garrett saying, hey, we need to pay Dak, make sure that he's taken care of. At no point did anyone say anything about Dak. Everyone talked about Zeke and him holding out. You know why? Because Dak was in place. He was in camp. Dak was there. Every time this franchise needs someone to be the face of the franchise, Dak has been that person. Now he's saying, hey, it's a money thing now. I'm worried about myself. I have absolutely no problem with Dak saying those things.
This is why I always talk about his intangibles and him being a leader, him being the adult in the room. And as you mentioned, maybe the adult in the organization, okay? Because he said the perfect thing. He didn't tie himself to Jason Garrett. He didn't say, oh, yeah, we got to get it done. Coach is important. But he didn't throw him under the bus. So he played right in the middle. So you don't know, is he supporting him? Does he want him out? And he shouldn't be that guy, And then when he says, I'm on the last, game of my contract too, I felt like he was kind of saying, what I took from it is, it came off like understanding I haven't been that great myself. Y'all coming, I know what Jason's going through. I know the criticisms he's getting, and I myself haven't been that great. You know, I'm on the same situation. Maybe I won't get a contract. So I thought it came off as rightly a little bit self-deprecating, and I think it'll play well with people that see that quote. So again, I thought he handled it perfectly.
Here's why I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if the Cowboys lose this weekend. This team needs a lot of changes to be made this offseason for a team that's actually very healthy and have most of their pieces in place. There's going to be a head coaching change. They're going to have to pay either Dak or Amari or franchise one of them. There's going to be a couple of moving pieces because not everyone can stay So I think it's time for this team to look in the mirror and say, well, what are we doing? Like, who are we going to be the next couple of years? What changes do you think this team is going to need to address right away, Nick?
Well, for all intents and purposes, it's going to be the same team that we saw this year on the field, just with a few less talented players. Cowboy fans tell me all the time, you don't understand our contracts. We've got all our linemen under contract. No, I do understand, but I also understand the way it's going to work when your quarterback's contract goes from $2.5 million to north of $25 or $35 million, that you are all of a sudden going to have to have some hard conversations and have some hard negotiations of you are either taking a pay cut or we are going to release you even with 2 years left on your deal, which is so I think the only systemic change is going to be coaching staff. Yeah. And it might be a total overhaul of the coaching staff, potentially on both sides of the ball. I don't know if they elevate Chris Richard, or I don't know if depending on what coach they bring in, very often those guys want to bring in their entire staff themselves. But the reason, Brian, this year is such a missed opportunity for the Cowboys is it is very hard to figure a way they will be more talented next year than they were this year, because this was the final year of the little cheat code you have in the modern NFL, which is more than competent, if not star quarterback, who is making less money than a great punter in this league, which is the situation when Seattle was in this situation, not just rookie contract quarterback, but mid-round rookie contract quarterback. What did they do with it? They won a Super Bowl and came a yard away from winning another one. What's Dallas going to have done with it? We made the divisional round twice. And so that's, to me, the bigger disappointment of the year is I have no reason to believe the team I don't think they can overhaul the roster. They can only overhaul the coaching staff. The biggest change that they're going to make is going to be two. Of course, the head coach is going to set the culture and the character of the locker room and that football team, and they certainly need a different shift in their coaching and character. The second one is the offensive coordinator. And the reason why I say that is because what are you going to do with Zeke, who's going to be one of the best, highest paid running backs in the league, and then Dak? Does this offense continue to be an offense that's going to run the ball 25, 30 times a game, or are you going to be an offense that leans a little bit more on the quarterback, similar to what they did early in their season? That's the biggest question and concern for this team. How does this offense play in the years moving forward? Do you get a guy like Lincoln Riley that has a big-time offense that can move the ball up and down the field, throwing the football, or do you get a guy more conservative that wants to run the football? Ron Rivera wants to run it, take the air out of the ball, and play great defense. That's the biggest question, because you're going to have to pay at some point Dak at some point. You're going to franchise him or make him one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. He's going to be a highest paid quarterback. You have already one of the highest paid running backs. Both of these guys are going to have to eat. Do you pay this guy to hand the ball off, or do you pay him to throw the ball down the field? That's the biggest question for them. Well, that's a heck of a question. We all know they got to get rid of Jason Garrett. Okay, but most coaches, I would think, the top coaches, they're going to want to have a lot of say in their staff, right? Yep. And so what is Kellen Moore was the golden boy. This is his first year. He's young. It's hard for me to see them getting rid of him. You know, I mean, I won't be shocked, because, again, if Jerry just changes course and says, look, I'm going to, like he did with Bill Parcells, we know it didn't work out, but you go get a coach that you're going to let run everything, they're probably going to want to bring in a lot of their own staff, if not an entire new staff. And that's where it'll be interesting to see, though, what they do with Kellen Moore, because he was supposed to change the offense up, and he did, and obviously it didn't work out. So, but that's the major change they need to make. Otherwise, look, you've said it. In this league, coaching is more important than any other major sport. So if they bring in the right coach, I think with this roster healthy, they can win and be a factor in the NFC.
You made a good point. A real good coach is going to want to bring at least one of their coordinators in. Back here, Brian. Brian Westbrook talking New England Patriots, who still have a little work to do if they want a first-round bye. They need either a win against the Dolphins this weekend or a Chiefs loss to the Chargers. Should be easy in theory, as the Patriots crushed Miami 43-0 earlier in the season. But Brian, do the Patriots absolutely need this bye if they want any chance of making another Super Bowl?
Well, I think they do if they want to have a chance. I don't know that they have a huge chance, but if you want to have a chance, you certainly need that bye. You need those home playoff games. And it's because Tom Brady hasn't been great on the road. Even though he's been special at home and all of the road game and all the home games that they've had, all the Super Bowls that they've won on the road in the playoffs, he's been 4-4. And so when I watch this team all season long, I look at this team in the first 8 games. The defense is scoring. They're getting special plays from the special teams. They're averaging almost 30 points a game, right? Then I watch the last 7 games. I'm watching this team defensively. You're still getting some big plays. You're not getting the scores. The special teams still getting some big plays. You're not getting as many scores that way. And offensively, you're only averaging 20 points a game. That's a big difference. And so having that home bye, having the ability to get Edelman healthy, I think is going to help this team. Giving Tom Brady, an older quarterback, a little bit of a break, it certainly helps this football team. But playing at Gillette Stadium is the biggest part that's going to help this Patriots offense.
They unquestionably need the bye. All right, they've never won the Super Bowl without the bye. They've never been to a Super Bowl without the bye. Okay, and that's when their offense was really good. They still couldn't get over the hump without that. So they definitely need it now. And they're playing, I don't think it's just a coincidence. Maybe I'm, wearing rose-colored glasses, but I don't think it was just a coincidence that last week now the playoffs are nearing, that Tom Brady plays better, that the running game gets on track, and I think they're going to be playing their best football at the right time. I don't think they'll win the AFC. I don't pick them as a favorite, but I do give them a shot. I think I give more of a shot than Nick does, but they still need the bye no matter what. And Bill Belichick is the best in the league. I don't think anybody disputes that, at preparing for the opponent. 15-5 in the regular season off a bye week, and they're going to need it. If they face Kansas City in the second round, they're going to need the extra time to prepare for Pat Mahomes. And that's something Casey has to worry about, because Belichick with 2 weeks to prepare is dangerous. We saw what he did to Sean McVay, and you're still seeing the repercussions from that with the Rams. So, yeah, they need the bye week, and if they get it, I think they'll be relatively dangerous.
Let's think about this from a slightly different angle. If they don't get a bye, it means that after they finally, for the first time in 2 months, played a great football game against the Bills with the division on the line in theory, they lost at home to the Dolphins as 17-point favorites. So if they don't get the bye, then everyone, the train that I've been riding as a near solo conductor for the last year or so, that the Patriots are done and we are just waiting to see it be official, it will be overrun with folks jumping on with no tickets if they don't get a bye, because it will mean Ryan Fitzpatrick and Brian Flores, former Patriot defensive coordinator, as the head coach of Miami, which I think is an interesting wrinkle of this game, went to Foxborough and beat them in a game they needed to have. So if they don't have a bye, they're drawing dead. Not drawing slim, drawing dead, not only because they have the extra playoff game, but because they would have played their single worst game of the season in their game that will be set 6 or 7 days before their playoff game. With a bye, I still am not a believer that a team that, to my eye, has played one complete game of football, both sides of the ball, for 4 quarters, one time in the last 8 weeks, is all of a sudden going to be able to do it against the 2 best teams in the conference. Kansas City in round 1 or round 2 at home, and then in Baltimore in round 3. Now, is there a scenario where Tennessee gets the 6th seed, upsets Kansas City, and so New England then gets Buffalo or Houston, and then Tennessee goes to Baltimore and upsets them? If the Patriots' path is the Bills and then the Titans, and both games are in Gillette, yeah, I suppose there's your 1%. But a realistic path involves them having to face Kansas City again. And one note on that: they're 30-10 in the postseason under Belichick and Brady, which is just a bananas. In fact, they've played 40 playoff games, won 30 of them. They're 17-1 against teams they did not play in the regular season. The only time they've lost a playoff game against a team they were facing for the first time was the Super Bowl to Nick Foles and the Eagles. They are 13-9, which is good, but not overwhelming, against teams they are facing for a second time. So one of the narratives I've heard is, the Patriots, the second time around. In the postseason, that has not been the case for them. If you're going to get them, you need to have faced them earlier in the year to have a real shot at it. The Giants teams that beat them in the Super Bowl, both of them played them in the regular season. So what do Kansas City and Baltimore have in common? They played them in the regular season. Houston as well, if somehow they have to play Houston. So for all those reasons, even with a bye, I'm not buying them. But without a bye, they got no shot because it means they lost to Miami in a game they needed.
With that bye, and you made a great point, Chris, the 2 weeks off is huge because it gives Belichick an opportunity to scheme differently. I remember we played him in the Super Bowl, and of course, there's a 2 weeks between the last regular season game, the postseason game, NFC Championship, and the Super Bowl. So we're preparing for 2 weeks straight to face a 3-4 defense. 3 down linemen, 4 linebackers. They come out in a 4-3. 4 down linemen and 3 linebackers. So offensively, your mind is blown because they changed everything up. But in that 2 weeks period, they've done a total shift in their completely different defense, something they hadn't shown all year long. That's what whatever team that comes into Gillette may be facing if they get that bye. That's going to be huge.
I brought this up earlier. A lot of that falls on Bill Belichick now. I mean, you know that we haven't seen the best of Tom Brady. This is where we always have this debate that we've had for years and years. Is it Brady or is it Belichick? Well, Brady has clearly fallen off of this peak where he's been. If they are going to go deep, you don't think this now maybe the argument sways a little bit more towards Belichick?
If they win the Super Bowl with Brady at 42 years old, unless Brady all of a sudden really makes me look like an idiot.
But he did last week. Not that he made you look like an idiot. I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. But he actually played a good game.
Brady played a great, I thought the best game he's played all year against Buffalo, and I think he deserves immense credit for it. I don't think that is duplicable time and time again in the postseason. If the Patriots win the Super Bowl, I don't think it's going to be because Brady has a bunch of throwback performances. I think it's going to be because of what you said, Jenna, which is that this defense does what it did in the Super Bowl. Brady was not very good in the Super Bowl against the Rams, but he didn't have to be because Belichick, with the 2 weeks to prepare, threw things at them they were not ready for and held the second highest scoring offense in all football to 3 points in a game they also had 2 weeks to get ready for.
First things first, while plenty of teams still jockeying for playoff position, Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens are sitting pretty. They've already locked up home field advantage throughout the postseason, thanks in part to a balanced offense, which includes wide receiver Willie Snead, who is kind enough to join us this morning. Willie, thanks so much for hanging with us.
No problem, guys. Good morning. Happy to be on.
Oh, well, we're happy to have you. I'm not going to sit here and ask if you've already stopped to smell the Baltimore roses, but can you fully appreciate how much you guys have done so far this season, how successful you guys have come up to this point?
Yeah, it's been awesome. We got a great group of guys, and everything was set in stone when we first played in Miami this year, and I feel like we just took off from there. We had a couple bumps in the road throughout the season, but I think we really started to find our niche after Seattle, and we just started rolling from there. So we got a great group of guys, and we're definitely blessed and happy to be in this position.
And obviously, you guys have enormous things out in front of you. You guys have only checked off one of your goals, win the division, and then it goes on from there. With that said, we were talking briefly off the air about how much fun it does appear you guys are having. I know it's a job, but we all strive to have fun at work. It seems a little, and I say this complimentarily, like a high school team that really loves being around each other. Is that a fair way to put it? Can you maybe give us a window into the type of fun you guys are having, even as pro athletes?
Yeah, that's definitely the vibe. I mean, we have a bunch of young guys in our locker room, and they bring that energy all the time, just goofing around, playing around, but also being serious when we need to be. And, you know, we work really hard during the week, so when we get out there on Sundays, we just trying to have fun. We trying to have a ball with each other. And we know that we got each other's back. It's a brotherhood that we've built up since last year. And, you know, it's just great to see everything coming together. You know, that's how we like to keep it around here. We like to keep it loose. We like to have a good time. But we're definitely all about the wins and making sure we put in the work in.
Willie, one of the keys to that success and having the fun is Lamar Jackson. You've been there for both of his seasons. How much has he improved, or how has he improved so much from last year to this year?
I think the thing with Lamar last year was just the confidence of coming in the NFL and being elite. He got thrown into the mix like halfway through the year. I believe we were 4-5 against Cincinnati when he first started. And, you know, he always had the ability to be great. I don't think anybody knew about his arm talent until this year. But he's definitely, you know, buttoned down, and he went to work this offseason. He wanted to throw. He wanted to be a better passer. And, you know, that's what he's been doing this year. So, you know, the things that Lamar has grown, and he's still growing as a player, as an athlete, as a, you know, just a professional, he's definitely got so much more room to grow. But this year, he's definitely taken the league by storm, and that's just all about, you know, the work he puts in and, you know, how serious he is about the game.
Willie, he's also become one of the most popular players. You can't even buy one of his jerseys anymore. And as a result, we now know almost everything there is to know about Lamar Jackson. But give us something, tell us something that we don't know about him, that only you guys would know from being with him day in and day out.
Man, dude is a clown, man. He loves to have fun. You hear me? He's always in the walkthroughs playing around. You know, he's in the locker room joking. You know, between him, Mark, and Marquise, you know, they always having a ball. And that's that personality I was talking about earlier. We got a bunch of young guys, and he's one of them. And he just brings that fun energy, that fun life that, you know, a lot of teams, you know, might be missing. And, you know, he brings that energy, and we feed off of it. And, you know, he's a goofball, man. He loves that fun. He's a kid playing a grown man's game. So, you know, he's having fun, that's for sure.
Obviously, you guys have shown, mostly thanks to yourself, Hollywood Brown, Lamar, and the tight ends, that you guys can throw the ball as well as any team in football, but you're also a historically great running team. And one thing at all levels of football seems to be the case: running can sap the will of your opponent. It's seeing defenses get run on and run on and run on. When you're out there, even in games, because there's been some games this year where you don't have monster numbers, but where you're blocking, do you hear some of the chatter or see over the course of the game almost some of the emotion drain from the face of the opponent? Like, again, they're just running at 6 yards every time. Can you feel that when you're out there, when the momentum turns within the game?
Yeah, for sure. And it definitely starts in the third quarter. You start to feel their will, and then you kind of get a feeling of, you know, how well are they in shape? You know, like, are they still bringing it like they were in the first quarter, or are they kind of like, you know, they balancing it out, and we kind of, you know, taking our position on them. So, I mean, our run game is very heavy. You know, we put a lot of time in the offseason, you know, perfecting the run game and also the passing game. But that run game is serious, man. It starts to wear on people in like the third, the fourth quarter. You're really gonna find out if teams are, you know, about that life. So, you know, it's fun, and you know, we do a great job of making sure we get on our guys, and we have elite running backs: Gus Edwards, Mark Ingram, Justice Hill. You know, those guys make it happen. So between them and the O-line, you know, they doing their thing up front.
Willie, of course, before you went to Baltimore, you were in New Orleans with Drew Brees, the future Hall of Famer. How are he and Lamar as leaders? How are they similar, and how are they different?
Yeah, well, Drew's 40 years old, and Lamar is like 22. So
well,
there's a huge age difference. But as leaders, I think they're both really competitive. I know when I was in New Orleans, Drew was always playing games or like doing competitive stuff, like whether it was throwing footballs in throwing footballs in a trash can, or like playing, you know, cornhole or something like that. He was very competitive. And I think Lamar is the same way, in the sense that when it comes to game day, he doesn't like to lose. And he's going to do everything possible to make sure that we put ourselves in position to win games. And that's how Drew was, you know, all the time. And, you know, between his film study and his execution on game day, you know, that's what makes Drew elite. And I think Lamar is just at a young age where he's starting to learn each year that, you know, hey, I got to do this better. I got to watch film more on this team just to prepare himself. So the age difference is a huge gap, the experience. But I think when it comes to being leaders, they're both very competitive, and they both have a will to win to get the job done.
You guys have obviously played all the best teams in the AFC. I know you have work to do. You guys have already clinched the 1 seed, so you're not going to play everyone week 17. You'll have the bye. If you do win the divisional round, who do you think would give you the best game in the conference championship in Baltimore?
I think it'd be the Kansas City Chiefs, because they have a very explosive offense, and we went down to the wire with them week 3, and they've given us trouble over the years. Last year they gave us trouble, but I think that team right there is very explosive. Their defense is athletic enough to stay with us, but I like the Kansas City Chiefs. I like seeing them. because the matchups are so great. It could be New England, but if you're asking me, I think it's going to be Kansas City.
Willie, I know you guys have a meeting that's about to start. We'll let you get to it. Thank you so much for spending the beginning part of your day with us. We appreciate it. Good luck this postseason. We'll be watching.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Willie. Good luck.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern.